The special meeting of the Annapolis City Council on Monday, January 22nd, 2018 will be called to order at 7:02 p.m. At this time, would all willing and able please stand for a moment of silence in memory of Mr. Thomas Vodak, Sr., who passed on Tuesday, January 16th, 2018, will be followed by an invocation from Alderman Fred Pione. Thank you. Fred.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this gathering here this evening. Please guide us in our deliberations as we seek to do your work, your good work for others. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone. Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Buckley?
Here.
Alderwoman Tierney? Here. Alderman Payon?
Here.
Alderwoman Pendell Charles?
Here.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Present.
Alderman Rodriguez?
Here.
Alderwoman Henson?
Here.
Alderwoman Savage?
Here.
Alderman Arnett?
Here. Granicus is not here.
Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the first item on the agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First item on the agenda is for the approval of tonight's agenda.
At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Second. You need to make it first.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, there are ceremonial items on the agenda. One is a City Council citation to Terrence Wright and Lon Parrell for the Parole Tree Planting Project.
Alderman Pendell Charles, Mr. Wright and Mr. Powell, would you please join us at the front table?
Yes, please. Thank you. Good evening to everyone. This City of Annapolis City Citation is awarded to Lon L. Powell and to Terrence L. Wright, who is also our Master Gardener in our ward. On behalf of the citizens of the City of Annapolis, we're pleased to confer upon both of you this City Council citation in recognition of your exceptional role in many Ward 3 environmental projects. The Council applauds you for your role as the President of the Greater Parole Community Association, Mr. Powell, and the Chair of the Greater Parole Community Association's Health and Public Safety Committee, Mr. Wright. We commend you for your unprecedented environmental work, including the planting of more than 63 trees in Parole, most recently in the Forest Villa community. Through your assistance and actions, Chickwapin trees can once again be seen on Chickwapin Round Road. We are proud to recognize you today for your work and are honored to have you as an exemplary citizen of our city, given under our hands and the Great Seal of the City of Annapolis this 22nd day of January 2018, signed by our Mayor, Gavin Buckley, Ward 1 Alderwoman Eleanor Tierney, Ward 2 Alderman Frederick M. Payon, yours truly, Sheila M. Finlayson, Ward 4 Alderwoman, Mark Rodriguez, Ward 5 Alderman, Shanika Henson, Ward 6 Alderwoman, Rob Savage, Ward 7 Alderman, and Ross H. Arnett III, Ward 8 Alderman. Congratulations to both of you. And Mrs. Broadbent, as the head of our Office of Environmental Policy, we'd like to thank you so very much for all the work that you continue to do on behalf of the residents, citizens, and visitors of our beautiful city of Annapolis. Thank you so very much. And Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for your support.
Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is a presentation of a city council citation regarding the Annapolis Fire Department.
Okay, Chief Stokes, would you please join us at the front table?
Good evening. If I can ask Chief Altamari from the Anne Arundel County Police Department to join us up here. So this citation is a great example of a team effort. This was a county and city partnership. This particular call was a gentleman suffered a cardiac arrest in Hillsmere Shores, and it was an Anne Arundel County fire engine, Anne Arundel County Police Department police officers, Annapolis City Paramedic Unit, and Annapolis City EMS supervisor responded. This gentleman, we arrived, this gentleman was in full cardiac arrest. Everybody did their portion of the call correctly. It's a great team effort. Paramedics did their thing, got a pulse back, got him to the hospital. The hospital team was there. They got him to a cath lab. Just hit some work on his heart. And this guy's alive today, breathing. And it's a great call, a lot of people involved. So we have citations for the entire crew. It's a great team effort. City-county partnership, we have a great partnership working together. So this is a great team effort. So we're going to call these folks up one at a time and come on up. Oh, do you want to say something? I'm sorry, you want to say something?
Is the gentleman there?
Yeah, that's later on.
Okay, cool.
There you go.
Bradley Clark. Chris Barnett. Lieutenant Mary Pittner. Captain Jay Cornell. Firefighter Ryan Lewinsky. Firefighter Rodney Brittingham.
Corporal Andrew Salnix. And Corporal Richard Scott. This is my old patrol shift, folks, so I get a little torn up when I see that. Congratulations, brother. I'm proud of you. PFC Ryan Shipley. I think he couldn't make it tonight. Joe, is that right?
So is the staff from Anne Arundel Medical Center here? Oh, they are, good. Come on up.
Sure, I mean, I can.
Okay, yeah, we'll say who's here.
So this is wonderful Dr. Elizabeth Reinick. She is the interventional cardiologist. This is mine, Tracy Turner. Miss Barbara Perkins. Mr. Dale Morris, who was unfortunately not able to make it with us today. Chris, I'm going to murder that. You want to do it? Chris Greskowitz.
So I'm going to do a little plug for the hospital now, because years ago, we didn't have a cath lab in town. So years ago, this guy had been taken to Baltimore or Washington Hospital Center to have this procedure done. So now we have our own cath lab, thank God. So we took him locally. So one good thing about this whole story is the gentleman survived. He's actually here tonight. Here he is.
That's so funny. So, I love these stories. I just want to thank all you guys and this whole team effort. This is what makes community here. We're lucky to live in a town like that where so many people care about one another. And from the bottom of my heart and from the city, we thank you for everything you guys do. Thank you.
Oh, gosh, I would just like to say thank you for everything. And these guys here with their award, what's it called? The Star of Life, the Star of Life. These are the superstars of life right here. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
Mr. Mayor? Go ahead. You know, Mr. Mayor, we had a different set of circumstances. Well, actually, it was quite similar, but I had a different group of superstars that did the exact same thing for me. I was dead when I hit the proverbial ground.
Whoa.
And was brought back by the Annapolis City firefighters and paramedics, and against the 1 out of 12 odds, I'm here, and it's thanks entirely to a different group of superstars, but I'm forever grateful for what the Annapolis Fire Department did for me.
Cool.
Thank you.
Mr. City Attorney, please read the next item.
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda was a proclamation in recognition of the role of Annapolis in the victory at Yorktown, Virginia, ending the Revolutionary War on October 19th, 1783, but that
You can move it down the schedule.
But that will be moved down to the schedule. Okay, that'll be moved later on in the agenda tonight, so that we're going to go next to petitions, reports, and communications, beginning with reports of the standing committees.
Would any old person like to present a report? Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Finance Committee met last week to start the annual budget grind. We're looking forward to receiving your budget, and we're hoping you do a good job, because we think you're in trouble. We'll be meeting again this Wednesday at 10:30 here in Council Chambers.
Alderman Padell.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next meeting of the Public Safety Standing Committee will be on Monday, February the 5th at 6 p.m. here in City Council Chambers. Thank you.
Alderman Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A joint closed session of the Economic Matters Committee, Rules and City Government Committee, and Finance Committee will be held this Thursday, January 25th at 10 a.m. To discuss the contents of the proposal from New Market. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, next on the agenda is comments by the general public.
So comments next. During this comment period, we're only commenting on O-118, Public Ethics and Finance Disclosure, O-2-18, Water Service Agreement, Mid-Atlantic IRA LLC, O-318. Yeah. Oh, okay. And these are the ones we're not talking about, and we're not talking about at this time the lease for the Market House. Our first three speakers are Bill Reichard, Catherine Burke, and Ted Edmonds. Please state your name for the record. Thank you.
My name is Catherine Burke. I live 102 Lafayette Avenue, and I'm also a business owner in West. I understand the current HPC chair is asking for a reinstatement of her chairmanship. Her term expired back in July of 2017, and she has served as chair of HPC since 2003. As a resident and business owner in the historic district, these are my reasons why the reappointment was not appreciated. Much has taken place over the past 14 years of her term as chair, but we have not seemed to have moved forward on issues such as incorporating arts into the historic district. We have not seen any effort made to evaluate or
allow alternative environmental materials to be used when replacing or upgrading historic residential buildings. Because of HPC, the city spent so much in court fees over the tsunami fiasco, when it turns out the chair of HPC knew from the beginning they had omitted murals from their guideline requirements. Yes, the chair of HPC should have worked on correcting that omission 4 years prior to that tsunami fiasco, when HPC approved a mural that was painted on the side of the building at 85 East Street, when she stated in a public testimony, quote, "We need to work on that," but she didn't. While other cities have modified the HPC codes in recent years to reflect modern materials and environmental concerns, the HPC chair has proposed far more restrictive languages, including allowing HPC to inspect the interior of a resident's home. Although the HPC code clearly states that HPC may only regulate what is in public view, the HPC still encourages homeowners to apply for permits when modifying backyards and other areas outside the public view. The chair pushes selective enforcement, most clearly on vinyl windows, where some property owners are cited while others are not. Why has HPC, under the guidance of the current chair, failed to follow through on over 30 residents who were notified that they were not in compliance with HPC guidelines regarding vinyl windows? I ask you, members of the City Council, do you agree that the flawed rollout of the HPC legislation could have been prevented if there were not a clear conflict of interest between the HPC chair and the alderman at the time, her spouse, the Honorable Joe Budge? A line item on the upcoming HPC January 25 agenda reads, election of officers. If the current HPC chair is re-elected by members of the HPC Commission, can opinions be voiced in City Council chambers by Annapolis City residents regarding the re-election of the HPC chair? Will opinions be recognized, or are the HPC bylaws written in a way that any suggestions regarding outside oppositions to elections within the commission be regarded null and void? If anyone on the city can answer any of these questions, I and many others would appreciate it. Thank you.
Alderman Savage. Catherine. No. Alderman Savage has a question for you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just wondering if somebody can get back to her. Is that a question for the Department of Law?
Specifically about January 25, if the current chair is re-elected Thursday night, does that mean it's done? No one can challenge it?
Well, if someone nominates her to be chairperson again, and the majority votes in favor of that, then that's what happens.
So if that happens Thursday night, then she will remain again for another, how long, 3 years?
No, that's, you're confusing an election with the term, with her term. Her term expires on a certain point, and she serves unless and until someone is appointed other than her. In the meantime, there's nothing preventing that commission from electing her chair.
So the voting is controlled by the members of the commission, and the outside public has no say in the results, correct?
Yes, that's the same with any board or commission.
And once that person is voted in by the commission, are there term limits, or can she, if she chooses, take the entire 3 years or whatever?
I was trying to say that her term is for a period of years, and during that time, she can be re-elected as chairperson, but that doesn't, control the term for which she was appointed. So when her appointment is up, she would have to be reappointed. Now, I think that that her term was up at a certain point, you said, last year?
July of last year, her term expired.
Right, and the code says that you continue to serve there unless and until reappointed, or unless and until someone else is, appointed in her place, or unless she is reappointed, or until she is reappointed.
So if she's not replaced between now and Thursday evening, she may remain chair for the next 3 years?
No. I'm trying to tell you that the election can go forward on Thursday night because that's when the election is called for. Her term as chairperson is up at this point, and she either is reelected or someone else is nominated and elected. The term of her appointment is different than the term of her chairpersonship. Okay. They have annual elections, which is the same thing as any other board or commission. But there's two different concepts here. One is the chairpersonship, and one is the term of her appointment as a member of the HPC. So they are dealt with separately. Okay, so if she is nominated and reelected on Thursday, she still has to be reappointed by the mayor, or the mayor can appoint whoever he would like. But they're two different things. I'm trying to make this
no,
clear.
I understand. So
I'm not sure if I have.
Then please tell me, the bylaws of HPC do not, will allow the mayor to replace her with someone else? The code indicates that that the mayor appoints and the council confirms. Okay, so her appointment, if she's reappointed, would have to come before the council like any other board member or commission member. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you, Catherine. Thanks, Mr. Reichard.
Good evening. My name is Bill Reichard. I am a citizen of Annapolis and Eastport, and I am the spokesperson for the Concerned Citizens Group in Eastport. As you may know, the Concerned Citizens are an activist group that has been involved on the issues of planning and zoning, and specifically directing our efforts to ensuring that the zoning and planning laws in this city are followed, specifically by those coming in to do substantial development. The reason I'm here tonight is we have become aware, and I'm sure you already know, that the developers of the Eastport Shopping Center, along with developers in another corporation, have sued you. The City of Annapolis, the mayor, and the City Council are named defendants in a lawsuit filed January the 11th in the Anne Arundel Circuit Court. This suit challenges an ordinance that you passed last November, specifically O3517. It seeks a temporary restraining order against you. It seeks a permanent injunction against the implementation of a law that you passed. And it seeks a declaratory judgment on the efficacy and legality of the law that you passed. Ordinance 3517, as you well know, embodies provisions that protect and expand and codify the rights of citizens in Annapolis to participate at early stages when developers come in on major projects and file their applications. It is a significant piece of legislation, and it is very important to my group, to the citizens in Eastport, and I suggest to the rights of citizens in the city of Annapolis. When we heard about this last week, we asked our alderman, Mr. Arnett, if he had received a copy of the lawsuit. He said he had been read a copy, or the substance of it, by attorneys within the Office of Law, but he did not have a copy. It was this morning that he received a copy. And so one of the things I wanted to ask, and there doesn't have to be a response, it's a rhetorical question, but I'm going to presume for these remarks that Mr. Mayor, you and every member of this council has received a hard copy of the lawsuit that names you as a defendant. And that I implore you on behalf of the citizens group to read it. We are informed when we received the copy, we were then informed that a preliminary meeting with a judge in the circuit court on the developer's motion for temporary restraining order is scheduled for sometime on Thursday of this week. The time is yet to be decided. The reason I come here tonight to talk about this, there are really two reasons. One, from our standpoint, it is an urgent, important matter. We have a dog in this fight, but we are not represented in this suit as citizens. You represent us. We rely on the city of Annapolis to defend its own laws, and particularly ones that allow us to speak in important matters. So we are here to highlight that, to bring this to your attention from our point of view, and to do one other thing. We have some experience in this over the last year. Our group is currently before the Board of Appeals on the Eastport Shopping Center issue, and on the other side of the table are the very people that have filed the lawsuit against you. So if your Office of Law needs any help, or you want to talk about this some more, we're here to help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reichard. Thanks for all your work. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Mayor?
Okay. Alderman Savage. Mr. Reichard, can you...
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your testimony, and I would like to officially request a copy of that, since it sounds like we are all named on that. I have not seen a copy yet. I've been informed about it, and I find it a despicable attempt to shut the public out of the development process. That's
thank you for that, but I'm going to tell you, I am dismayed, frankly. I have to say it. I am dismayed that you do not have a copy of this. Because Thursday can come and go, and it may be if we hadn't brought it to your attention this evening, you would be subject to a court order, never having looked at the document that was served on you. So let's all catch up. Let's do this together, but everybody read it, because it's going to have potentially important ramifications, and people need to focus. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reichard. Next up, Stuart Cohen.
Good evening. Stuart Cohen, 32 Steele Avenue in Annapolis. I rise up to address Resolution 3-18, which has been introduced by a number of the aldermen and the mayor to urge the General Assembly to pass the affordable drug legislation. For the last 15 years of my career before I retired, I was involved in major pieces of litigation against numerous name brand and generic drug manufacturers. We fought to bring the price of drugs down because, unfortunately, Americans pay more for their prescription drugs than any other place in the world. It's untenable. I think it's important that every level of government, we've been litigating these issues for many years, as I said. It's important now for every level of government to become involved in seeking to bring down the price of prescription drugs for our citizens so they can continue to afford them and receive the necessary prescription drugs so that they can achieve better health. So I urge the City Council to unanimously pass this resolution, urging our General Assembly to pass this additional legislation on the heels of the legislation, the wonderful piece of legislation that they passed at the previous General Assembly. So thank you very much for having introduced this, Alderman Rodriguez and the other aldermen and the mayor, and I urge you, please pass it tonight and let our legislators know how you stand.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you. Ted Edmonds.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pass along to John Hollander, like to lead me on. I mean, if you'd like to go vertically down with it.
Okay, John Hollander.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have some picture books and document books for the City Council, if I may distribute.
Just the name and address for the record, please.
Sure. My name is Jonathan Hollander. I live at 302 Burnside Street in Eastport, in Annapolis. Thank you. I am here speaking on behalf of the Newport Condominium Association, but also as a concerned citizen of Annapolis, like all of us here. The current structure of many of the boards of this city, be it the Board of Appeals, the HPC, or the Port Wardens, all only allow appeals to circuit court for concerned citizens. This is an unduly expensive and very time-consuming process for individual citizens when they disagree with, be it developers, in our case with the South Annapolis Yacht Club, or with the commissions, be it untenured chairwomen who've been in power for 14 years and going for their next 3. The situation I would like to address this evening is the South Annapolis Yacht Club. After sitting here in the meeting only 2 weeks ago and listening to testimony of SAYC, which was very friendly, when we sent our surveyors out the next morning to confirm measurements, the police were called and our surveyors were forcefully removed from the project. This is only one of many issues with the South Annapolis Yacht Club not acting as good neighbors. The important situation here is that tomorrow night there is a Port Wardens meeting, we hope not the final. This is relevant because tomorrow is January 23rd. On December 4th, inauguration night, fortunately, we are given the ability to finally submit evidence about concerns on lateral lines. However, in the next 2 weeks, the South Annapolis Yacht Club proceeded to hire 4 additional engineers, none of which have proposed any work product or provided any work product on this project. In later emails, we found out this was done only to prevent us, the Newport Condominium Association, from hiring these same engineers. You can imagine how hard this was over New Year's and Christmas Day for us to find unconflicted engineers. Furthermore, the main issue in this project is the ownership. There is no deed for this property. It does not exist because it was illegally infilled. If you look on the pages and the documents I provided, you'll see numerous pictures of these deeds showing that. What we have only asked is for the city to direct the Office of Law to hire an independent attorney or the Office of Law to determine who owns this property. None of us would ever apply to build a garage on property we don't own. We won't seek permits for that. However, in this case, the developer not only has submitted false measurements and given false testimony, but he has also asked to build piers on property that is not deeded, that does not exist in the state of Maryland. This could all be solved by the city only hiring an attorney to figure that out. Furthermore, regarding the dimensions, as we all know, a picture speaks 1,000 words. I direct your attention just to the one single leaflet picture. I took this picture with a friend of mine from the property. It very clearly shows 20 feet on a tape measure. We are still confused as to how the tape measure for South Annapolis Yacht Club is differing from ours. We have asked numerous times for the South Annapolis Yacht Club to provide us any pictures of their measurements. In fact, in their plans submitted with the port wardens, they do not show existing site plans. This matters because the entire waterway access is very constrained, at this time only 15 feet. If they take another 4 feet or 5 feet of access from us, our boats will have no ability to even exit. Again, all the city has to do is contract to one of the unconflicted surveyors, which will be very hard, but hopefully you can find one, and measure this distance and show a picture to prove so. Again, the challenge is tomorrow night's the port wardens, meaning the port wardens do not want to rule on any of this. All they want to do is kick it up to circuit court. But us as individual condo owners and condo association payers, we can't afford to keep on fighting in circuit court. We elected the city council members, and we hire our taxes pay for officials of the city to do their jobs. If that entails hiring an external attorney or an external surveyor, then so be it, and please save the city another set of lawsuits and litigation expense. That is all I have at this time. Any questions, please ask, but also please look at the documents and the photos provided. You'll see a 13-foot Boston whaler. That's clearly not 24 feet. We all can look at the pictures. We all know what's going on here. We only ask that the city spend the time in planning and zoning, evaluate what the developer says, rather than take as given. There have been way too many false statements, and with the fourth lateral line submission that conflicts with an accepted lateral line agreed upon only 18 months ago, we all must recognize there's something wrong with this application. The burden is on the applicant, not on the neighbor to prove it wrong. The burden is the applicant to prove it right. Thank you.
Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a very complicated case, as you probably are aware. You've been briefed on it, because we're trying to ask the port wardens to opine on something that I don't think is ripe yet, given that there's question of land ownership. But this whole issue of citizens having to pay the freight to question things that are going on in the city is starting to come up more and more. And I think as a council, we're going to have to come to grips. We actually talked about it at lunch today with the city manager. We're going to have to find ways to fill in these voids. I think the port wardens are in a difficult situation, but I also don't see how they can move forward with a decision without having the property ownership clarified. And I do see more and more, I think there's 3 different legal actions going on in Ward 8 right now where people are scrambling to find outside representation, paying to hire outside experts, and I think they're having to pay to do things that really the city ought to be doing for them as they are tax-paying residents. So I don't have any answer to give either to Jonathan or for this hearing tonight, but I do think this is becoming quite an urgent matter for the city council, including you.
Alderman Tierney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with my colleague, Alderman Arnett, that I have to ask, how much time and effort did it take for you to put this presentation together?
I've been working on this, for months.
Yeah, and that speaks more of the problem, really, that you have to make this effort. But getting into the technicalities of the issue, when you dredged and did your own lateral lines, were those documented?
Correct. We dredged the entire waterway in 1992. We would not dredge an area we didn't own for the sheer fact it's incredibly expensive and time-consuming to do so.
So why then are their lateral lines different? Is it just, they're just pretending that someone won't notice, or what?
Well, all we can tell you is the opinion of our surveyor, which says that their lateral lines are based on non-existent property.
Okay.
And again, this can be determined. We shouldn't be arguing about the lateral lines. The city should be telling us what are the lateral lines.
Yeah.
The city can hire outside counsel to do so. It's not up to the neighbors to defend when we think a fast one's being pulled on us.
But in my last question, though, the ultimate, jeopardy here is creating this pinch line, this pinch area that you spoke of last time, or someone else did. And has the harbor master commented on that?
Yeah, the harbor master has commented numerous times. She believes it's an unsafe situation. You can just look at the pictures alone and see how tight this area is. There's not an existing lateral line in Spot Creek that runs at a diagonal. It doesn't exist. Why should this be the first one? It doesn't make any sense.
Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, have you had an opportunity to testify or give comment to the Port Wardens Board about this?
Yes, we have. The Port Wardens does not want to address any specific facts. They say this can all be appealed to Circuit Court.
So is it, do they give a up or is it just approval or denial? Can they issue conditions like the Planning Commission does?
First of all, there have been numerous nights of hearings before the Port Wardens, and I don't think that this should be, they're in the middle of a very contested administrative hearing, and they are about to start deliberations, and I would recommend to the council that it not become involved and embroiled in what is governed by the Port Wardens and not the City Council. The City Council has its mandates under the code, and the Port Wardens has its mandates under the code, and the Port Wardens hears these applications. There have been, and I'm going to just say briefly that there have been, as I said, multiple hearings before the Port Wardens. The public has had a very ample opportunity to testify at least 2 different hearings from what I recall. No one has been denied the right to give public testimony, and I can tell you that there are very narrow criteria that the Port Wardens considers in an application such as the one that SAYC has before the Port Wardens, and those criteria are the criteria that the Port Wardens must make factual findings on in coming to a decision. And the Port Wardens, and those criteria do not include ownership of property. That is not one of the criteria that the Port Wardens considers in these applications. And I can tell you that the issue of ownership of property, when it's disputed, cannot be decided by an administrative board or commission of the city. They do not have those powers. Those powers are in the Circuit Court for Anne Arundel County. That's just the way it is. Our boards and commissions are not experts on boundary disputes. They don't have the ability to decide boundary disputes, and in any event, they have no authority to decide boundary disputes. That is something that has to be done by the court. So that's about as much as I would want to say. I'm concerned about the deliberations the integrity of the deliberations tomorrow night, and I would hope that the board can just do what it is supposed to do and have a fair hearing and a full hearing and make substantive deliberations and come to its conclusion. Thanks.
Well, that was one of the issues. I heard of 3 main issues. One was the property ownership. So you're saying that has to be decided by the courts. Another was access in terms of between the property, between the piers. They're saying the access, according to on page 9, he has a picture that has these proposed 30-foot boats completely up to the other, preventing boats from leaving the neighboring pier. The other thing is safety in terms of the pinch point on this other handout on Spa Creek. So I'm just wondering, like, are those issues that the Port Wardens would hear?
I can tell you, Alderman Savage, that one of the issues that is outstanding is navigational safety. Another issue that is outstanding, obviously, is the lateral lines. In the hearing, the attorney for Newport at the beginning indicated that no other criteria were at issue, as I recall. So the criteria that are at issue are those two. So navigational hazard, yes, is still under consideration and must be deliberated by the board, and there's been plenty of evidence that has been submitted about navigational hazards, whether there is a hazard or whether there is not. The other issues that are really not in contention, from what I understand from Newport's attorney, are effects on marine life, effects on conservation, things like that. There's really been no testimony of significance on that, except that the applicant has had its experts testify on those matters, despite the fact that those particular matters weren't contested, because they do have the burden of proof. Okay, so the burden of proof is on each of the criteria set forth in the code, and title is not one of those criteria.
And so I guess the other issue just occurring to me is the lateral line. Is that something that this board will also handle?
Excuse me?
The lateral line?
The board has to make findings on the lateral lines.
Okay. And so do they have legal representation, or is that, or advice? Do they get that from the Office of Law? The Office of Law, okay.
Me. I staff the Port Wardens, and I, have an oath to staff them in a, honest and fair way, and I do.
Okay. Well, thank you. And just, it does seem to get, I've only dug into this so much, but it does seem to be a lot of concerns that need to get resolved, or should get resolved, I think, to keep, the Port Wardens may not be, they may not be accountable to the people, but we need to listen to our constituents and make sure there's a solution to this.
Yeah, I agree that the council is accountable, obviously, to the public, but so is the Port Wardens. They have to come up with the right decision, and, it's not just the applicant and the opposition, but, what the Port Warden says has an effect on the community. So they have the same, I would say that they have the same obligation as the council has to represent the interests of the public, but the Port Wardens has specific criteria that the code directs them to make factual findings on, and that's what they have to do. Just like any other board or commission, the Board of Appeals has review criteria, the Planning Commission has review criteria, HPC has review criteria, and that is what they are obligated to consider and make factual findings on. Otherwise, if it's appealed, it's going to come right back, or it's going to be overturned. So they know what their obligations are. I've pointed them out to them, what the review criteria. I didn't need to do that. They were aware of them anyway, but I may make it a point to reiterate them to any board or commission during their deliberations.
Alderman Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Hollander, for your comments. Mr. Elson, I think I also just want to clarify. So the determination of the Port Wardens is to determine the lateral lines, correct? That isn't something that they have to do as part of the deliberations?
Yes, one of the criteria is to make findings about the lateral lines.
Thank you. And so if the property rights are in question that make up the lateral line, to my understanding, or the laterals that they are indicating, wouldn't we want to determine whether that property is in fact theirs as an integral or important part of the lateral line decision?
It's hard to answer that question up here, and I really feel like the Port Wardens needs to just do its work in accordance with what the code charges the Port Wardens to do, and the code does not charge the Port Wardens with making decisions about property disputes. That is something that the circuit court handles, and there is no way to get around that. The boards and commissions are not, charged with deciding boundary disputes or property line disputes. And that's and so, I'm concerned about, this conversation here. I'm going to have to instruct the port wardens tomorrow, if they're watching tonight, not to consider any of this for tomorrow. And, and I think I understand the questions and the need for answers, but, we're in the middle of an adjudicatory administrative hearing, and we need to let the port wardens do its job, just like any other board or commission, and without the pressures of, coming from the city council. The city council does not have jurisdiction to tell the boards and commissions what to do. It's as plain as that.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Ellison, I have one final question. If much of this is because Mr. Anderson sat here and testified in front of you only a week and a half ago and made these statements. Second, what is our remedy, Mr. City Attorney, if we find out we've lost 5 feet of waterfront because the pilings are not at 24 feet? He has not provided an existing site plan. He has sat here and testified verbally his pilings are at 24 feet. Where is the proof? How do we remedy this if his marina is built?
Okay, well, the first thing I would like to address is that, just like you, the council gave Mr. Anderson the ability to come to the podium and say whatever he wanted to say, just like you were entitled to say whatever you wanted to say tonight. My concern is that the council start getting embroiled in something that is within the jurisdiction of the port wardens. It's two separate entities that we're dealing with. And so that's the first thing. So you were given your opportunity, and I'm glad that you had your opportunity. Your remedy, I can tell you, I can't give you legal advice. I don't represent Newport, obviously. I represent the city, and I can't give you legal advice, but I can tell you that there are remedies which involve taking appeals to the circuit court. That's the way it is with any board or commission. You go from the board or commission to the circuit court on appeal. It's done a lot. We have appeals all year long from administrative agencies that we handle through the circuit court. So your remedy is through the circuit court.
Maybe it's time to change the appeal process for these commissions to make it easier for the citizens.
The appeal process is state law. It has nothing to do with city law. State law says that appeals from administrative agencies go to the circuit court. So it's not city law. That is you're thinking the problem is. If you're concerned that there's something wrong with that system, you got to go to the state, not the city.
Okay, thanks.
Okay? Yeah.
Thanks for all your work. Thank you, Jonathan.
Good evening. My name is Ted Edmonds. I live at 937 King James Landing Road in Annapolis. I also have a condo at Newport Condominiums. I would like to ask the aldermen, all of you, to raise your hands if you are boaters. Somewhat boaters. How many of you feel you can navigate Spa Creek on a Sunday afternoon when there are kayakers, boats going through there safely today? Raise your hands. No. Okay. Oh, what? The mayor said that? You feel you can do that, sir?
I've got a beautiful boat in the Spa Creek now. She's a real head turner.
I am a licensed captain. I've been in the water for 65 years. I've sailed and motored the Mediterranean, the Caribbean, the East Coast, the Great Lakes, and a lot of the rivers in the United States. I have challenged the port wardens on several occasions at their meetings that the city attorney just mentioned to come out in a boat and go into the navigable waters in front of Newport Condominiums and either pull in forward or pull in backward to the proposed slips that SAYC says they're going to put in there. To date, they have not done it. I put a letter in writing to the port wardens asking Gene Gottlieb to bring his 28-foot Albin trawler down to that area. I told him I would meet him, I would go there with him, and I would like to see he, and there are 3 other members of the board that are appointed by the mayor, two of which are licensed captains that do a number of things around the city and in ships coming up the Chesapeake. To date, none of them have come over. As part of my commitment, I had asked Beth Bellis, our harbor master, to bring her dinghy or her boat over to look at and try to manipulate the waters in front of our development between the pilings that exist today, without moving, as Jonathan said, another 4 or 5 feet out. She did come over with an assistant in her inflatable dinghy. It took her 5 minutes bouncing off pilings and boats and pushing off things to get into a slip. You can ask her about that. I said, "Do you want me to help you do that?" She said, "I am a licensed captain. I know what I'm doing." And I said, "I'm a licensed captain, but maybe I could help you." Anyway, the port wardens are appointed by the mayor. The 4 that exist today under the charter, and I'll read this from what their charter is. The port warden shall consider the effect of the proposed structure alone and in concert with present and other proposed uses on marine life, wildlife, conservation, water pollution, erosion, navigable hazards, the effect of the proposed on congestion within the waters, the effect on the other riparian property owners, and the projected needs of the proposed commercial and industrial use. That's their charter. Did I not hear the city attorney say that they're not, I thought he said they were concerned with navigational hazards? Did I not?
What I did say, and this, again, I'm concerned about the discussion here tonight because we're in the middle of an administrative hearing, and they're about to deliberate. And, again, they're going to have to be instructed tomorrow not to consider anything that they may have heard tonight. But yes, there's been plenty of testimony on whether there is a navigational hazard or not, and they need to make factual findings on whether there is. And I have to, tell you that there was a site visit out there on land, not
on land. Yes, sir.
Okay,
I was there.
And so that's what they felt they needed to do.
And we weren't allowed to talk to them and ask them.
Well,
to
you
go in,
can't.
but I understand.
The case law on site visits was upheld at that time, and there's no discussion during a site visit.
But, sir, in the initial meeting that was offered, they said they would go out with the harbor master in a vessel. You look at the testimony. In the initial presentations that were given, they, Gene Gottlieb, and whoever else said it, were going to do a site visit by water with the harbor master. Did that occur, sir?
Not that I know of, but
not.
You got to understand that the port wardens decides how to conduct its own hearings, okay? And if they have enough evidence to make findings, if the evidence is substantive enough, then they'll make findings. If they think that it's not substantive enough, then they'll continue to develop the record. So, I really am concerned about this. I don't want, we can't, prohibit anybody from coming to the podium tonight. That's fine, no problem. But I'm just concerned about where this is all going. I want the port wardens to be in a position to conduct fair deliberations tomorrow.
So do I, as long as I understand that they're fair. In the presentations by SAYC, as Jonathan alluded to, there have been several submissions of lateral lines, varying lateral lines in their presentations. Yet we accept what they do now. And in fact, the Planning and Zoning Group have approved, without having an engineer look at it, what the lateral lines might be or should be.
All I can tell you is that the port wardens will make do their deliberations tomorrow night, and they know that they have to conduct fair and full deliberations based on substantial evidence, and that is what will happen tomorrow.
The last item in their charter is, they will not increase material pollution, erosion, materially impair marine life, wildlife conservation, or have material impact upon increasing boat congestion. I'd like to see any of the 4 of you that raised your hands come out and back into a slip that they're proposing. Now, they're talking about angled slips up to 28 feet, 32 feet. along the wall, the bulkhead on the southern side of the property, and try to back in there. Go all the way down. I had Alderman Arnett out there at one point over a year ago when it wasn't out another 5 feet, and he said, I wouldn't want to bring my boat in here. So to that, I leave it to you. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ted. Thank you. Got one more speaker, Gil Gilden.
Now you're going to enjoy my presentation. It's about 306 Burnside Street, where I'm also a Newport resident. But Gary, you can relax. I'm not here to pick on the port wardens. I know they're doing their best. I'm here a little bit to address what was talked about in the last meeting. I'm also here to to reiterate what I was referring to. But just to go back a little bit, I've lived in Newport for 14 years. My folks have lived there for 45. There was some mention of the history of Newport and Petrini's and their relationships and how everything was just wonderful. And the truth is that anybody who knew John Petrini knew he was somebody who loved to fight and argue with everybody. And I was 17 years old working for Edgar Petrini, and he was the same way. But as far as being a neighbor, when the person who owned my home said, I can see your trash, it looks bad from my neighborhood, or from my windows, would you mind if I paid to have a shield put up or a shed built? Mrs. Petrini said, there's no reason for you to look at our trash, and built a shed. When John put up big lights and they were shining up at our townhomes, my next door neighbor called him and he moved them and turned one off so that they would not be bothering us anymore. And I knew John, my father was a harbor dock master for the community, and I kept my boat there and have sailed out of there since I was 18 as well. And John parked a 30-foot boat by the bulkhead. And the only way to get out literally was to have one person on one side and the other person on the other side pushing the boats apart. So I was arguing with John, and my father came out and joined in and said, John, you've got to move this boat. And he said, John, because he liked to be obstinate, said no. And my father said, well, I'm going to have to appeal to a higher authority. And John was like, do whatever you got to do. And I was angry, and my father came to me. I said, well, what the hell are you going to do? And he said, well, I'm going to call his mom. And you know what? The next day, the boat was moved, and it was way down the end. But that's the kind of neighbors they were. When my brother died 8 years ago, and John was a friend of my brother and myself, we fought, but we were friends. And he came over and hugged and kissed my parents and sat and talked with them and had a drink with my father. Excuse me. John was never going to make it into the Good Neighbor Hall of Fame, but he was a good neighbor. He wanted to treat us fairly, in his mind, fairly, and he did. And we have gotten together with SAYC, and we went over there 4 years ago now. We went over and tried to meet with them, find out what the project was, express some of our concerns about boat lifts and things. And 5 minutes into the whole conversation, it was, I can put a 100-foot boat there, and there's not a damn thing anybody can do about it. And after I heard that the third time in the meeting, it was like, okay, the meeting's over. Ross was there. And I realized this was not going to be a good neighbor. And then we went over again a year ago trying to re-engage. And Brett gave us a presentation. And when we asked questions, he said, this is the presentation. This is what's going to be built. And we were not given an opportunity to negotiate or what a good neighbor would do. And I realized he's not a neighbor. He's a builder. He's a developer, and he's going to develop as much as he possibly can. And I understand that. I had a construction business too, but I always took care of the neighbors around me. I wanted to make sure that they were there. what I'm trying to get at is, we have spent an inordinate amount of time, effort, and money, and we're fortunate. We have an attorney on our board, we have 2 attorneys that live there, we have, developers or real estate people who own real estate there, so we have a little bit more resources to fight builders. But I've heard of these other stories since I've been involved in this, and the builders come in and they just, they have to go to court, and their property's taken away from them. They're not only their riparian rights, they lose their pier. In our case, we're talking about losing 11 slips and part of our pier. This is not neighborly. This is not what, at least what I think the law should be. We've owned this property for 50 years. Well, actually, we've owned the dock. I guess the state owns the land itself. But what I'm asking you is, please, you've got to give, the port wardens are working hard, and I understand that, but they've got to have resources. The inspectors and the permitters have got to have resources, because all that's going to happen is we're going to end up in lawsuits, the citizens, we're going to spend a ton of money, and eventually it's going to come back to the city, and the city's going to spend a ton of money on attorneys and legal fees and all of this, and it could be solved if we had the resources up front. If we had the resources to keep the records. The city throws away records after 7 years. The only reason we have any records is my father was an accountant and he kept everything. So we at least have some documentation. But these, I know you're a new administration and everything, and it's obviously it's not your fault or whatever, but we need to put the tools in place so that there's no more, well, we can't find the document, or this happened 7.5 years ago, so everything was trashed. We need the city to help us, protect us, and make it so that people are not losing what belongs to them because a builder has more money, better lawyers, whatever. I mean, SAYC came to an agreement, there's a record of it now, with the people on the west side of the property because they were infringing on their rights. And that's another story. But in any case, what I'm asking for, as I asked the last time, is to have the city really look at their systems, look at, can we get an engineer, can we get a survey team, and then save the money on attorney's fees later on. It just makes sense to me.
Thank you.
Anyways.
Thank you.
Any questions? No?
I'm going to get Brett's mum's phone number.
That's not a bad idea. I wish I'd thought of that. Anyways, thank you all for your time.
Oh, hang on. Alderman Arnett. Yeah.
I think you're right about the resources. We ask all of our boards and commissions to do an incredible amount of work with no pay. We get more than they do.
Yeah.
And with resources, and I long argued that we have shorted the land use resources that we need. If you can't come to the Finance Committee budget hearings, if you could send me an email making some of those points about the resources, that would be much appreciated. We really do have to look after this. It was the comments I was making to the mayor. The port wardens are being, people want them to do something that they don't have the purview to do. And we, the city, has to find a way to fill in the blanks where there are gaps in what our boards and commissions can cover and gaps in the processes that we have. So I think we'll be talking about that quite a bit. Mark and Sheila and I on the Finance Committee. This clearly, given the testimony and the nature of the testimony tonight, land use issues are just becoming incredibly volatile and having a big impact on everyone and on all sides, and we do need to have more resources. So if I could impose on you to send me an email, I assure you I will put it into the record.
I'll be happy to do that. I'll also ask some other people who have also had the misfortune of having lost property and lost cases against large developers because they couldn't afford to fight them. So, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gil. Is there anyone else present who'd like to speak?
I was here first.
Now, what's your name? No.
My name is Diane Butler, and I'm here with the Eastport Civic Association. I'm the vice president of that association. I handed out some handouts of SAYC, which I'll refer to in a minute. And I don't want to beat a dead horse, and I thank you all for your patience in listening to us. But I do want to support Mr. Reichardt's request for the city to mount a vigorous defense of the declaratory judgment and temporary restraining order filed against the city, and each one of you personally, that is meant to claw back the law that gave citizens a seat at the table in the development review process. Imagine that. So some of you will remember that the basically development review process was streamlined in the last administration. And that streamlining process took place with the assistance of Mr. Alan Hyatt. He had expertise and guided the city in how to streamline the development review process. And part of that development review process meant cutting out citizens at certain levels of the review. So 03517, as you all, well, not you all, but many of you who were here at the last, in October 23rd, will remember that 03517 was really an attempt to add transparency back into our development review process. And it was, voted on, it was legal, it's the law. So Mr. Hyatt now, who doesn't really believe citizens deserve a seat at the table in these development review processes, filed this lawsuit against all of you to claw it back. Simple as that. Why should citizens be involved with the review process? This is all really interesting because I'm on one of the transition teams for land use and mobility. And one of the previous planners for the city, Eileen Fogarty, sat around with former Alderman Ian Pfeiffer, former Planning Commissioner Will Scott, and said, wouldn't it be great if we got citizens in the review process early on? Imagine that. So she's going on and on. We got to tell the mayor, we're going to put this in the transition report. It's all great. I'm like, okay, we have that law right now. And she goes, no, certainly we don't have citizens at the table at the beginning of the review process. I'm like, we do. We just passed it on October 23rd. And she looked at me and she said, well, why aren't we doing it? I said, well, it just passed, and Alan High is trying to repeal it. So here we are, and I am just asking you to support the city and citizens of the city by not allowing this law to be basically deemed illegal. And the temporary restraining order should also be deemed, well, Gary knows how to, or the city attorney knows how to defend this, and we hope that he does. Any questions?
Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick clarification. I think you stated previous administration, but I think you meant the Cohen administration who streamlined the
Actually, you're right. It
zoning
goes back
process?
further. I meant to say a prior administration, and I didn't mean to say which one, but I believe it did start with Mayor Cohen's administration. If anyone wants to look at the videos, there's great videos of John Arison and Alan Hyatt talking about how it would have no effect on us if we deleted the review process of having a Board of Appeals between some of these commission review process. So it used to be that you'd go from the Planning Commission to the Board of Appeals to the Circuit Court. Now you go straight to the Circuit Court at great expense to the citizens. So it didn't work well for us now. It didn't work well for us then, and it won't work well for us in the future. The second thing I wanted to talk about was just reiterating what some of the points were made earlier on South Annapolis Yacht Center. And the city attorney said that we're in the middle of an administrative process, and that is true. And you also said that the port wardens should not and cannot legally determine title. And I agree with that, because none of those people can do a title search themselves. So you said that the remedy was to go to circuit court. That's not the remedy. This is the city's job to look at things like title up front. Because if I were to build a garage, someone used that example, and file a permit to build a garage on my property, and I couldn't prove that I own that property, you wouldn't let me build that garage. So we're saying the same thing here. Don't make the citizens have to pay. We've already paid over $75,000 in legal fees and God knows how many hours. This is a paramount decision title that the law department should decide before it kicks the can down the road to the port wardens. Don't put the burden on them. That's not their expertise. And once they decide and it goes to the circuit court, the level of review, the standard of review is very high. It's arbitrary and capricious. And for the circuit court to make a decision to overturn an administrative body below is all but impossible. So I'm just saying, not just in this case, we've seen it in many cases. There are a lot of people here in this room that know our city and our law department are not making decisions that are really important to us. They're kicking the can down the road to the port wardens, to the planning commissions, you name it. We need to do a better job in-house right now making determinations before making citizens go to circuit court. That's all I have.
Thank you, Diane. Over here.
My name is Elvia Thompson. I live at 704 South Cherry Grove Avenue. And what I want to talk to you about is not as weighty as all this, but still important to a lot of us. I have a business, a nonprofit business, Annapolis Green, on the corner of Maryland Avenue and State Circle. And when we got to work on January 10th, we found that all the parking on the outside of the circle now goes to the media trucks and media cars through the beginning of April. So a parking situation that's already really bad in that part of town that impacts the retail merchants on Maryland Avenue and State Circle is now even worse. And I am coming to ask you if you would talk to Speaker Bush and give the media, which needs to be there, and we're all glad they're there, give them space in the state garage so that they don't cut down the little bit of parking that we already have. And, you know, it really does impact all the retail there on Maryland Avenue. And we had no prior notice of this at all. So it's 24/7. Actually, it's 24 hours a day, Monday through Friday.
Ron Padell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Thompson, was this the way it was last year?
No, ma'am.
What was the...
No, there was no specific parking reserved for the media, at least not on our side of the circle. I understand that it has been to some extent, and I think fewer spaces. I'm not sure on the other side of the circle. But my side of the circle is where the retail is.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Alderman Tierney.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm fortunate to meet with, I should say fortunate to meet with SP Plus, our new parking management company, on a weekly basis. And my understanding was that those media trucks were moved to not College Avenue, the street to St. John's Garage on that side, and that we shouldn't have as many on the circle. So I will talk to them on Thursday about that. There should be less, and it sounds like they're not parking where they should be. Are there signs posted?
Yes, there are signs. And the signs go through April 9th, the last day of the session.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for your time.
You know, I looked into that too. We thought it was next to St. John's, so we'll both look into it. Thank you. Thank you. Seeing no motion in the chambers, I declare the comments by the general public closed. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item.
Gladly, Mr. Mayor. The next item on the agenda is your update to the public.
Okay. I want to tell everybody it's Bruce Miller's birthday today, Sally Nash's birthday, and Gary Elson's birthday in a few days, so we're all going to sing happy birthday. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Bruce, Sally, and Gary. Happy birthday to you. All right.
How old are you?
Mr. City Attorney, next item on the agenda, please.
Next,
Sorry,
Alderman, yeah.
I want to make a general comment. If I don't know when's the appropriate. I should have let you know, Regina, but it's not what you think. I'm just going to go ahead and say it.
Yep.
Thanks.
Alderman Rodriguez.
It's a comment that's not on the agenda, but is affecting a lot of lives in our very own community. So I thought I'd address it, and starting out by saying that, well, I'm relieved that it looks like Congress might soon reach an agreement and reopen our government. I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that a good number of people in this country, many of whom are our neighbors right here in Annapolis, can't breathe a sigh of relief while temporary protective status, or TPS, and DACA are still left unresolved. I'd just like to take this opportunity and let our neighbors know that we are here for them, they are welcome here, and we are one Annapolis. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is approval of the consent calendar.
Okay, so that involves some budget revision requests, GT 8-18, 9-18, and 10-18, and 3 first readers, 0418, 0318, I'm sorry, 0418, R318, and R418.
Are there any objections to any of the items on the consent calendar?
Mr. Mayor, I don't have an
Alderman Savage.
objection. I don't have an objection. I just wanted to say thank you to the Finance Committee. I thought you did a very excellent, thorough job at addressing some of the concerns around these, answering the questions around these transfers. So I went and watched the meeting to get some answers, and so thanks again. Very thorough job.
Right, here no objections.
Mr.
I move
Mayor.
approval of the consent calendar.
Mayor.
Sorry.
I would ask that my name be added as a co-sponsor to Resolution 318. I did ask the resolution sponsor, Alderman Rodriguez. I don't know how my name was omitted, but I would ask at this time.
Your name once?
Oh, the copy that's before me that's printed, I don't see it on the printed version.
Once the legislation was ready for the final agenda, we can't change it until it's adopted, and once it's fully adopted, anybody who requested sponsorship, their name will be put on when it's in final form.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Mayor?
Alderman Pendel? No. Oh,
She had her
sorry.
hand first.
Sorry, Sheila.
I'd like to be added to the two resolutions, R3 and R4 also. Thank you.
And I had indicated that Alderman Rodriguez that I would be like to be added as well.
Yep, we will do that.
Thank you.
And I'd like to be added to R418, Mr. Mayor.
Anybody out there? No.
3, just 4. 3 and 4 for me.
Sorry, just want to clarify. So,
Alderman Rodriguez?
I just wanted to clarify which ones we have nine sponsors on now.
I can't hear him.
Okay, I won't. Okay, got it.
Hearing no objections, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Buckley?
Here.
Alderman Pendel Charles?
Yes.
Alderman Finlayson?
Aye.
Alderman Rodriguez?
Aye.
Alderman Henson?
Aye.
Alderman Savage?
Aye.
Alderman Arnett?
Aye.
Alderman Materny?
Aye.
Alderman Payon?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, next on the agenda is the public hearing on O118, the Public Ethics and Financial Disclosure Ordinance, which is for the purpose of updating and amending the Ethics Code, the City Ethics Code, and clarifying certain definitions, ensuring city officials and employees are aware of their responsibilities pursuant to the Ethics Code, extending conflict of interest provisions to include lobbyists, amending the use of prestige of office restrictions, changing current policy regarding the reviewing and copying of financial disclosure statements by the public, removing the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board members from the financial disclosure filing requirements in accordance with the recently enacted state law, and making other minor editorial changes.
Okay, no one has signed up to speak, so declare the public hearing on O-1-18 closed. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Mayor Buckley, next on the agenda is a public hearing on ordinance O-2-18, which has to do with the water service agreement for Mid-Atlantic IRA LLC. It's for the purpose of authorizing a water service agreement providing for the extension of city water service to 3032 Arundel on the Bay Road, located in Anne Arundel County.
Has anyone signed up to speak on that? No speakers. Declare the public hearing on O-2-18 closed. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, next public hearing is ordinance O-3-18 concerning abandoned vehicles for the purpose of permitting an authorized agent of the City of Annapolis to exercise limited enforcement authority in the impoundment of abandoned vehicles, establishing a fine for leaving wrecked or non-operating vehicles on public property.
Any speakers? Okay, we declare O-3-18 closed. Oh, sorry.
We would,
Alderman Turner,
as far as,
Alderman Turner.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. As far as that legislation, Alderman Rodriguez and I talked on, and I will review with SP Plus that they reach out to the Hispanic community on the enforcement, so there's no surprises there.
Should we wait to discuss this
Yeah.
before we vote on, like?
Oh.
Well, anyways, what Alderman Tierney is referring to, thank you, Alderman Tierney, for this, is the need for this legislation arose from, it's an ongoing, nuisance situation that goes across the city, but specifically in an area that is has a heavier Spanish-speaking population in terms of abandoned vehicles and parking and so forth. So the only concern I had that we need to just be mindful of is that we give a proper notice and a proper outreach in Spanish so that they're aware of the new fines and impoundments, so that it doesn't fall as a surprise. I think it's important when that happens. Thank you.
Declare the public hearing on O-3-18. Sorry. Mr. Enders?
Mr. Mayor, we'll take care of the outreach, make sure it's widely spread.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Mayor?
How you doing?
Perhaps then maybe we should keep the public comment open then, if we have not given outreach to the Hispanic community to allow them to come in and address their concerns with and weigh in on the ordinance. When I was looking at it, it looks like we have quite a bit of work to do on it. We don't define the term abandoned vehicle in the statute. So we haven't yet, I don't know that we've met due process yet in the statute. We don't say what an abandoned vehicle is. I don't know that we in here, when I looked at the county ordinance for impounding vehicles, the county ordinance really gives a very detailed description of it. It gives a very detailed process of what a person can do if they're grieved by the statute. So I think we have a lot of work to do on the city end of it if we want to take this step and put this in the hands of a private company. So I'd like to see us really beef up what we have here, and then if it's going to maybe disproportionately affect the Hispanic community, maybe we hold open the public comment on it and give them the opportunity to come in and weigh in.
Okay, Alderman Henson, we can keep that open for you. Yeah. When would you like to keep it open?
Customary, till the next council meeting.
Is that enough time for you, Mr. Andrews?
Thank you. Okay, next we've got this proclamation. I'm just going to... Now, we don't have the nice printed copy with the frame yet. I'm just going to read out the proclamation. Ms. Giddings, could you come to the front? Thank you. Have a seat. Whereas in 1965, the United States Congress declared the march to Yorktown, Virginia from Newport, Rhode Island, a national heritage trail important to our understanding of the War of Independence and the formation of the United States of America. Does this sound good in an Australian accent? On June 19, 1781, French General Baptiste Lee Rochambeau left Newport with about 5,300 French soldiers to join up with the American troops under General George Washington and the troops of the Marquis de Lafayette en route from Eastport through Virginia in one of the largest Allied troop movements of the American Revolution. And whereas on March 30th, 2009, the President of the United States signed a congressional bill authorizing the 680 miles Washington-Rochambeau Revolutionary Route as a National Historic Trail. And whereas states and communities along the route from the Newport, Rhode Island to Yorktown, Virginia are partnering to identify the historic sites along the way, and whereas Anne Arundel County is engaged in identifying sites along Generals Highway, a National Historic Route on the march to Yorktown. Whereas the City of Annapolis was an important campsite and ship embarkation site for the troops under the command of General Rochambeau and Marquis de Lafayette. At campsites identified today as the property of the Eastport AYC and the memorial at St. John's College campus to the unknown French soldiers who gave their lives for American independence. And the Yorktown campaign began the final chapter of the American colony's war for independence. With the assistance of French allies, achieved victory for the American cause. Now, therefore, I, Gavin Buckley, as Mayor of the City of Annapolis, Mayor of Maryland, am pleased to be a partner in supporting the Act of Congress to commemorate the story of the long march to Yorktown along the Washington-Rochambeau National Historic Trail that passes through our city and recognizes the significance of the victory of Yorktown in the birth of a new nation. Thank you for your work on that. I promise we'll have a nice, pretty framed copy because this one's just got texture on it. For sure. Do you want to get a picture now? Yeah.
Mr. Mayor? Yeah.
Alderwoman Tierney?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I need to mention that Mayor Ellen Moyer was very instrumental, for lack of a better word, in initiating that proclamation, and she would be here, but she is, she's sick. So yeah, I just wanted to give her credit as she's not here tonight.
Thank you. That is very true. Okay, Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, next item on the agenda is 0518, regarding the lease of the Market House to New Market LLC. It's for the purpose of authorizing the lease of the Market House to New Market LLC, the master tenant, for a certain period of time, subject to certain terms, provisions, and conditions. And Mayor Buckley needs to leave.
Alderwoman Finlayson is the most senior city councillor. Would you please come up?
first speaker this evening is Ms. Hollis Minor.
Good evening. I'm Hollis Minor. I live at 107 Northwest Street, and I'm also the Economic Development Manager for the City of Annapolis. I understand that there has been some question about the public outreach process for the RFP for the Market House, and I just wanted to give you a quick summary description of that process. First of all, the solicitation was advertised in the Capitol. It was posted on the city's website, and it was posted on eMaryland Marketplace, which is the statewide bid website. So it went to directly to 109 firms through that website. Then I also sent it to a number of organizations, the media, and individuals. So the organizations that received the information, first was the Anne Arundel County Small and Minority Business Coordinator, Joanne Jackson, Maryland's Best Agriculture, which is the Department of Agriculture's arm that does promotion for farmers markets and food farms and food. The Maryland Food Center Authority, the Anne Arundel Economic Development Corporation, the marketing department, who also did some outreach, and the agricultural marketing and development manager there, who serves the agriculture community. It went to Alderwoman Rhonda Pindell Charles, who forwarded it to 141 businesses in Ward 3. Thank you. It went to the Anne Arundel Commercial and Industrial Association, 70-plus members of local commercial realtors, brokers, and developers. It went to the Business Leaders Meeting Group, which is 30-plus leaders of every business organization in the city. Went to the Maryland Farmers Market Association, 22-plus members. To the National Grocers Association, 1,600-plus members. To the Independent Natural Food Retailers Association, 231 members. The Maryland Economic Development Association, and they posted it to their website, where it was exposed to 450 economic development professionals throughout the state. And it went to the Anne Arundel County Chamber of Commerce, and they sent it out to 600-plus members for 3 weeks in a row in their weekly newsletter. I also sent it to Brian Grawl, Grawl's Market, Jerry Hardesty, Jeremy Black, and Anthony Clark, 3 local restaurateurs, Barrett Lang, who is a local organic grocer chain owner, and then Rhonda Wardlaw also did a press release to all the local media, and I sent it again specifically to the media, to the Capitol, the Washington Post, and the Baltimore Sun business editors, with the hopes of enticing some eyeballs to become aware. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Minor?
I'm sorry?
I was asking if there were any questions for you.
Any questions?
I do have one.
Yes.
Might there be an organization of market house vendors or market house purveyors, and not locally only, but in
That
other
I don't know the answer
jurisdictions?
to that, actually. That's good. That would have been a good suggestion.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Our next speaker, Mr. William Powell.
William Powell, 17 Chester Avenue, Annapolis, City Council. Just going over the lease and looking at some of the things in it that I feel like that need to be tweaked more than changes. I'm familiar with a commercial lease, and this is definitely, most of it is a sweeter lease for the tenant than it is to protect the citizens of Annapolis. And the effective date and the abatement, they made the statement that they could be open in approximately 3 months. I don't understand why, if they can be open in 3 months, why would we be abating the rent for 1.5 years roughly? The citizens get nothing. I mean, they're recovering all their money. That's like me renting your house and say, well, I like to have some new deck furniture. I'm gonna put myself a walk-in pool in, but don't worry about it. I'll have it done, take it off for the rent next month. And really, that's what we're taking and looking at. And in rent abatement, I think the price is way under what it should be for the area. I mean, after all, they're renting square footage, and it's up to them to make a go of it. I hope you all have looked at their financial, that they can afford to go in and make these improvements. And one of the other things I was looking at was this rent increase of only 5% every 5 years. I mean, that's a ridiculous number. It should be 3% a year and not a rent increase once every 5 years. I mean, like I said, it's a sweet deal for the renters more than what it is for the city. And Alderman Finlacy, said back when you got pushed in the corner for the last time that money was spent on the Market House, that the city wasn't putting another dime in the renovations, and this is putting it in, whether you see it directly by the city writing a check or not. If they're not paying you your rent, then you're paying for the renovations because they're making the money off of it. And one of the other things that I noticed in here was on the subleasing and the rent increase, that when they make X number of dollars, I think it said $1.5 million, then the rent would go up like 2% or something. Well, if they're going to have the right to sublease stalls, how are you going to know how much money that they made? I mean, is this money based on the lease, or that when he does $1.5 million, you get it? Or is it when you add up all of the stalls that may be subleased out to reach this number? I don't see how you can come up with it. And I'm not an accountant, but it looks like to me it would be a nightmare to sit down, and if you've got 5 stalls rented and you only have one leasee, who's responsible to tell you, hey, next year we owe you more money? And that was another thing. I'm not too sure exactly how this reads, but I want the city, being me too, to be protected that 6 months from now they can't sell the lease and be the subleaser. We're renting it to them for $20 a foot. They find a subleaser, pay them $35, and they're making $15 a foot and laying back laughing. I think it needs to be written a little stronger and a little clearer that any changes comes back to the city. And on the hours of operation, if they get a liquor license, of course it's going to be a 2 a.m. liquor license. There's nothing written in the lease that spells out in any way whether if there's a possibility of getting a license or if they should be lucky to obtain a license. There's no safeguards built into the lease as far as, hey, it's going to be beer and wine, you got to cut it off at 12 o'clock. I mean, you know, in my opinion, we're only a stone's throw from becoming French Quarters with a Bourbon Street downtown at the rate things are going. And it would be a shame to see our historic district go down the hill like that.
Thank you, Mr. Powell.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is, I'm sorry, have a question, Alderman Payon?
How do you feel about the lease increases only allowed every 5 years at the end of the term as opposed to annually?
A bird in the hand's better than 2 in the bush. Take a yearly increase of whatever you feel like you can negotiate that's fair, but to take it once every 5 years is ridiculous. I mean, The city doesn't even break even on a number like that.
Thank you.
Are there other questions to Alderwoman Tierney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, and anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, but the hours of operation are for Newmarket is during the week they'll close at 10, and then on weekends they'll close at midnight. Thank you, Bill, for your testimony. So the liquor, and I think we have on record that they will not go for at 2 a.m. if I'm correct, and then also that that the liquor terms won't be addressed in the lease. That is subject to approval from the liquor board, and at that time they have to go out to the public again so the public can weigh in on that.
Well, I agree with you there, but I think that if they're able to obtain a liquor license, then there should be an adjustment for increase in the rent to make it more even on the playing field with all of the surrounding bars and restaurants that have to abide by and to pay the fair share. I mean, after all, this is a sweet deal. They're not going to be paying taxes, which everybody else pays. All of the outside maintenance upkeep is done by the city. Thank you.
Alderwoman Henson?
It's not,
Mr.
it's more so
Powell?
a comment.
Could you go back to the mic, please?
I just wanted to thank Mr. Powell for thoroughly reading the lease and bringing his comments to the council. I found particularly interesting your comment on how do you determine performance rent when there's a sublease? If performance rent is based on the gross revenue of the proceeds of the subleases, or if the performance rent is based on the gross sales of the subleasee. I found that particularly interesting, and I don't know that the lease addresses that, so thank you for raising that and your other comments as well. We did appreciate that. Thank you.
No other questions? Thank you, Mr. Powell. Our next speaker, Mr. Charles Newman, to be followed by Stuart Cohen.
Good evening. My name is Chuck Newman. I've been an Annapolis resident for 22 years.
Could you state your address, please?
I'm sorry?
Your address?
My address is 2104 Chesapeake Harbor Drive, apartment 102, Annapolis, Maryland, 21403.
Thank
you. Among other things, I'm a retired executive of Host International and the Marriott Corporation and spent 22 of my 26 years there as an executive with responsibility for retail, food, beverage, and merchandise operations at airports throughout the United States. I started at Friendship Airport in 1971 when the company ran 12 airports and then held progressively more responsible positions until I retired as a VP of Airport Operations for Host Marriott when we operated 72 airports throughout the United States and internationally and generated sales of $1.2 billion. I've spent a lot of my time professional career responding to RFPs, developing the proposals, reviewing the financials, negotiating leases, building the facilities, and operating the facilities over that period of time. So I just wanted to let you know my background wills to qualify my comments. I'm proud to say that over that period of time we won all of our bids by competitive bidding rather than just a high bidder number, so that you looked at other components of the proposal such as the concepts, the menus, the services that were offered, the financials, the quality of the facilities, the operation and management, and all the other components of a qualified proposal. I've never failed to renew a lease that I had. Most of them were 15 years with multiple 5-year extensions. And I'm glad to say that, for example, in Baltimore, we continued extending our leases and operated at that location for 35 plus years, in addition to many, many other airports around the country. Additionally, while I've been here in Annapolis, after retirement, I got kind of bored and went to work for the Harbor Master's office for about 8 years. So I spent a lot of time on Eagle Alley around the city dock and know the history of the the Market House quite well. After 8 months of this current RFP process, I am more convinced than ever that the city's administration over the past 18 to 20 years has never known what they were doing with their Market House or how to go about the RFP, proposal evaluation, financial analysis, desired retail concepts, performance standards, or the lease structure process. It has been a pitiful, painful, and embarrassing experience for the citizens of Annapolis and a gross failure of fiduciary responsibility for previous mayors and city councils. Based on where the current fiasco stands, I'd suggest we go back to the drawing board and start all over again rather than repeat the failures of the past. I read the articles in the Capitol, the proposed lease, and comments made by Bill Kardash at last week's meeting, and agree with Bill on 100%. The financial offer on the table is not adequate and would provide a competitive advantage over nearby competitors. Yesterday morning, I walked around the city dock about 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning, and looked into the dismantled enclosed Market House. It looked like a train wreck on the inside, and as if it had been abandoned. Not a good image to present to the public. The city too often looks like it's going out of business. During my walk around, I counted 32 food and drink outlets of various sizes, from Pusser's on Compromise Street, around Eagle Alley, through the Marketplace, and up the Main Street to Conduit. There are 32 facilities I mentioned. 7 offer breakfast items, 25 have lunch and dinner offerings at various service, menu, and price points, and 5 offer snacks such as ice cream, taffy, tutti frutti, and so forth. No one is going to starve downtown. And that does not include the other 5 or 6 facilities that are located between Conduit Street and Church Circle. I suggest the city reconsider the concepts and services that it wants to provide in the Market House, then reissue the RFP defining those items, listing the competitive elements of the proposals, the specified lease term and financial terms and conditions and obligations, and with a lease attached that allows the proponents to fill in the blanks of a minimum annual guarantee paid monthly with a yearly escalator versus a percentage rent by category of sales, for example, food, liquor, prepared meals, etc., and pay whichever is higher. The lease also needs to provide for reinvestment during the initial term, review and approval of menu, prices, service standards, etc., to guarantee quality standards and enhance customer service.
Mr. Newman, can you sum it up for us, please?
Sure. In my professional opinion, the current proposal and lease are unacceptable and not in the interest of the citizens of Annapolis.
Thank you. No questions. Our next speaker, Mr. Stuart Cohen, followed by E. Claire Conger.
Thank you, Stuart Cohen, 32 Steele Avenue, and I appeared before you last meeting to speak in favor of the proposal of New Market, and as many of you probably realize, many of us left the chambers thinking that nothing was going to happen, and were surprised the next day to find out that indeed a proposal for New Market had been advanced by the City Council. So first I want to say thank you for advancing that proposal. Since that time, I've had opportunity to talk to many of our fellow citizens in Annapolis, and every one of them relate the same thing to me. They have fond memories of what the Market House used to be 10, 15 years ago, and how disappointed they are at what it is now. And I understand the suggestions being made by the last 2 speakers, but I think the ship has already left on that. We cannot have an abandoned Market House sitting there for months on end, losing rent the entire time while it's vacant, and being an eyesore to both our residents and our tourists. So I urge the City Council to please keep this process moving forward. The mistakes that may have been made in the past, the city should learn from, but that should not hold up getting this New Market proposal finalized. And the last speaker failed to mention one thing that I consider an essential component of the New Market proposal: groceries. And in his survey, he did not count how many groceries or lack of grocery stores there are in the entire downtown area. And I pointed that out last time I spoke. I consider that to be an incredibly important and vital part of the proposal put forth by Newmarket. I'm delighted it's in there. I'm delighted the city is hopefully is going to proceed to conclusion so that we can have grocery store in our downtown area. Thank you very much, and take any questions any of you might have at this.
No questions, thank you. The next speaker, E. Claire Conger. Okay, moving on, Bill Kardash, to be followed by Travis Gray.
Good evening, Madam Chair and council members. My name is Bill Kardash, and I reside at 1 Acton Place in Annapolis. Before I begin, I just want to say that I had the pleasure of having kind of an introductory breakfast on Saturday with Keith Bouchard, one of the principals in Newmarket. By the way, thanks for breakfast. It was a very informative meeting, and in general, I think Keith and the group has put more effort into their menu selection than the city has put into its lease negotiations. But I'm here tonight to comment about the Market House and city finances. As you know by now, I'm deeply concerned about the poor quality of the lease terms the city has prepared. Like all of you, I attended the combined council work session last Thursday. I heard the testimony of several members of the negotiating team, along with Fred Sussman and Tom Andrews. All are involved with the lease negotiations and preparations. While I had hoped that meeting would provide some clarity to the process, it only provided more confusion about the details, lack of city's due diligence, and in general, financial ignorance about the commercial real estate market. For instance, when asked about rental rates, Brian Snyder, the procurement officer, mentioned the city used CoStar to provide an average rental rate of $23.12 per square foot versus the actual surrounding rental rates of $32 to $50 per square foot. By the way, just today I did the search on CoStar, and the rate for downtown Annapolis retail came in at $37.30 per square foot, with the highest at $65 per square foot. I'm not sure where that $23.12 comes from. This only concludes that this only includes rentals that are in fact reported to CoStar. In case you are unaware, CoStar is a professional service provided to brokers. In Anne Arundel County, it encompasses everywhere from South County to Glen Burnie, Crofton to Galesville. It includes office space along with flex space and retail. It is, in a word, a smorgasbord of rates. It is not reflective at all of the waterfront retail location enjoyed by the Market House and the properties surrounding it. No commercial realtor would ever rely on CoStar to determine comparables when selling or renting commercial real estate. That can only be done through a property appraisal. Brian also said he used 5,000 square feet, not the actual 5,326 square feet occupied by the Market House to calculate the rent. That's 6% of the floor space the city has ignored. Do any of you think that's good due diligence? Me neither. When asked about the rent structure, Mr. Sussman said, the Market House is a unique facility. I might agree with that when it comes to ownership and location, but it has functioned as a multi-stall food vendor facility for decades. Selling food and drink is no more unique to this building than to any of the surrounding bars and restaurants. When pressed, Mr. Sussman said, quote, the building needs a professional appraisal done. I couldn't agree more. The other issues addressed included whether or not the Market House is exempt from real estate tax, the matter of rent abatement, i.e. free rent or reduced rent, and how compliance with the lease terms will be measured and monitored. With regard to property tax, the city received a legal opinion in July from its bond and tax counsel, Miles and Stockbridge, asking if real estate tax could be applied to the Market House. I am mystified as to why this information was not shared with each council member. For some reason, most of the council never saw this memo. By the way, I have a copy of it if anybody needs to read it. For some reason, most of you never saw this memo that said, quote, "New Market is a large-scale restaurant. By definition, a single vendor may not qualify as a market. Without multiple vendors, this proposal does not appear to meet the property tax exemption," unquote. With regard to rent abatement, assuming the lease is approved and the tenant takes occupancy on March 1, the city will receive $0 of income through the end of 2018, then half rent for the first 6 months of 2019. That means the city will forego $128,000 in rent and receive a total of $48,000 for the first 16 months of a 5-year lease. That abated rent works out to $9 per square foot, while the surrounding businesses will be paying on average $50 to $58 per square foot to operate their businesses. Let me stop for a moment and propose a solution I believe that will be fair to the city's taxpayers and to New Market LLC. These recommendations are based on discussions I've had with commercial realtors and downtown property owners. I'd like to finish
I think maybe Alderman Arnett could ask you a question.
Explain to me the proposal that you would think might be suitable to everyone.
Yes, thank you. So one, set the base rate at $40 per square foot on the full 5,326 square feet of the Market House, with an annual escalation clause of 3% of the base rent. By the way, this rate is 20 to 30% below surrounding market space rental rates. 2, for rent abatement, no rent during the build-out phase or June 30th, 2018, whichever comes later. Full rent would begin no later than July 1, 2018. No rent is highly unusual. In this case, it is offered in consideration of their build-out and startup mode. 3, the lease, not the tenant, should establish the closing time at 12 midnight, regardless of the terms of their liquor license. The tenant has repeatedly said they will close no later than midnight, so adding this to the lease should not be an impediment. 4, the tenant should pay the property tax as established by the state, without any opportunity to offset against the base rent as proposed in the existing lease. The Miles and Stockman's research and opinion clearly indicates that New Market would not qualify for the real estate tax exemption because their business plan is a single operator rather than multi-vendor. 5, the lease term should be changed to a maximum of 10 years, an initial 5-year lease, renewable for an additional 5-year term, provided they meet the business plan they have offered. It is highly unlikely that this council will be here 10 years from now in 2028. As such, you should not enter into a long-term lease that would bind the city and its residents with a lease and a business plan that is not proven. If it is successful, let the future council renew it. You may recall it cost the city over $2 million to buy out Site Realty from a 20-year lease in 2005. Let's not repeat that costly mistake. 6, require personal guarantees of all parties in the LLC. A newly established limited liability corporation provides no security for the city and its taxpayers in the event of failure or bankruptcy. LLCs serve a purpose only for the owners, in shielding their assets from recovery. This isn't just an LLC, it is a new and unproven LLC without any history of performance. The city should not assume their risk. 7, do a proper credit check on the LLC principals. This is fundamental to any lease, especially for a new entity. No bank or lender would ever extend credit for a multi-year lease without this important step. Neither should the city. 8, finally, if the council can negotiate a revised lease that looks like these terms, I suggest that you eliminate the performance rent in its entirety. We want them to succeed. If they are paying a fair and competitive rent, the city doesn't need to share in their success. The better they do, the better for all of us. Based on what I heard at last week's council work session, most, if not all, of these items will be discussed in closed session. None of these items proposed breach the tenant's right to privacy. Any documents, such as their business plan or credit reports that are truly confidential, can be provided separately and away from the public eye. I strongly suggest lease negotiations be conducted before the public. I'm hopeful the city and this council will exercise its proper fiduciary responsibility and adopt the suggestions I have made. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. The next speaker, Travis Gray, to be followed by Fred Fishback.
Good evening. My name is Travis Gray, 110 Shiley Street in West Annapolis. I didn't get to stay for the whole deal last time. It went longer than I anticipated and had to get home. But I want to thank you all for making a decision. I've born in Annapolis, grew up here my whole life, lived in the city for about the past 18 years, and have watched the progression of the Market House, and I lived on PG Street back when it was the old Market House, and would visit there frequently, a couple times a week. And I also thank the New Market Group and the other groups that came forward to have the courage to take a stab at this, given all the history. And I appreciate what the New Market Group brings and the energy they bring and the track record they bring. I'm a residential real estate person. I'm not a commercial real estate expert by any means. So I can't speak to the details of the lease. But as a citizen of Annapolis, I just ask that you all consider for the community how important this is for the community. And not only for tourism, but as a community center, to me personally, and my clients and people I talk to, this is the heartbeat of our city, and it's been a embarrassment for the past however long it's been in a very mediocre state. So I would just encourage the City Council to work with this group, whatever is deemed to be fair. But I think it's more important for the city and for the community that they thrive and survive for the long term. I mean, I think what makes Annapolis so compelling are the businesses that have been here for the long term, the Middletons, the McGarveys, all up and down. I think we need someone who's going to be here and sink their roots deep into our community and be a part of it. For my daughter, who is 2 months old now, so when she's my age, she can see whoever is in there is there when she's my age. And from a real estate perspective, like I say, I'm not a commercial guy, but I would say from looking in and talking to real estate experts that I've seen in the commercial world, there is no comp that I can see from my perspective to this Market House. There's no comp downtown. Again, I deal in residential, but I think the most important thing is, just like on your street, if there's an abandoned rundown house on your street that's in disrepair and vacant, that brings down your whole street. And I think it's important for our whole community, commercial, residential, tourism, everything, that we have a stable, thriving business that's there for everyone to enjoy. And I did a little bit of research, talked to several commercial brokers that I know, and the one point that they made clear that I hadn't really considered is how important the Market House is to the community space that is open to everyone, not just the patrons of that business. The citizens can come and use the bathroom, use the picnic tables, all that. I think that's very important. And from their perspective, and what they've told me, is that you can't look at that the same way as you look at a McGarvey's or Middleton's or Federal House. It's different because we can't, if you're not a patron, you can't go in there. You can't sit at their tables and use that space. So I just ask that you consider that, and I think that's it.
Thank you. No questions? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Our last speaker, Mr. Fred Fishback. Last on the list, anyway.
My testimony is going to be a little bit different. I'd like to ask for a little different approach, if I may.
Absolutely.
I'd like to sit here because my ears are not so good.
That's fine.
In the event, I come here from a different point of view. I come here as a 61-year resident of Annapolis who's watched Annapolis evolve over time. I've testified many times to the dock master plan. I served on the Building Board of Appeal for 30 years, from 1980 to 2010. I represented the best interest of all of the citizens in Annapolis who came before the Building Board of Appeals, particularly with regard to property rights that relate to use of property as well as buildings that people build. So what I see is that you all are in a unique position of being a landlord, which is not your normal role. And you listen to Bill Kardash, you understand what a real landlord has to go through to make his decisions. Your legislators, you make the rules. Your rules follow a hierarchy of Constitution, Maryland enabling legislation, and then your laws, which have to conform with all of those laws. So what I've done here is I've made a copy of the Maryland enabling legislation that relates to the development of a retail area in the city of Annapolis. And if I may, I'll pass these out. Okay, so I've got them all set up here. Just take a second.
Stop his time.
3. 3.
Great. Okay, thank you. I want to see you after you're done.
Okay,
Okay, after you. That's yours.
I'm not offering an opinion, other than I think you ought to read this, because it's very germane in what your responsibility is. So I'll just turn the pages real quickly. The first one here, I've put little arrows beside the paragraphs that are really significant. So page 1 just talks about your role as a lawmaker, with an exception on page 2, which is an exception to the rules that you operate under. Number 3, get on my other glasses, sorry. Oh, legislative authority, 5204 legislative authority. This is just another generality where the arrows are that tell you what you all can do when you're making your laws and implementing them. 5-205 is your legislative authority. It's a generality, so it's not specific to your case, but it does relate to how you work when you make laws, what your limitations and authorities are. The next page is number 5, legislative authority. Another generality, but very important in terms of how you operate. I'm sure that some of you have read this before, or some of you know guys, 4 or 3 at least, probably haven't had the opportunity. 5-212 is local planning and zoning controls and displacement of competition. That's sort of where it starts right here, where it says to achieve the public purpose of the policy set forth under subsection A, this section, the General Assembly recognizes local government action will displace or limit economic competition by owners and users of property. So that's really where we are right now, is whether or not the city marketplace will modify the competitive thing that goes between different businesses. I guess the last page is really the most significant, page 8. And this is legislative authority, which says an authority may not exercise the power of eminent domain, purchase, sell, construct, or lease as leaseor, office or retail space. So that's really, I think, where you're finding yourself here, is that you are putting up a business situation. You're leasing money, or leasing the space to a lot of different operators. And that means that there's competition perhaps from those people who don't have space in the market house. So I'm just pointing this thing out to you guys. I know it's a tough job you got. That's my testimony. It's really just knowledge of what the Maryland enabling legislation has to say about your authority to make a competitive situation at the market house. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Arnett has a question for you.
So, Fred, I got lost in the page flipping. Can you sum it up one more time? Tell me what it is.
Would you talk a little closer to the phone?
I said I got lost in the page flipping and looking for the arrows. Can you give us a couple of sentences summarizing? Can you summarize in just a couple of sentences? I was trying to read along with you and I got lost.
Really, it's the last page. You guys are in the leaser business.
Turn your mic on and speak into his mic so they can hear you.
You guys are rule makers to start off with, but now you've come into a new role of being a property owner. And in this role, you are setting up a circumstance where you can give people opportunities that are competitive against the people who are not in the opera house, in the market house. That's all. So, I mean, what this says here is that you can't do that if you're following the Maryland enabling legislation, which you're obligated to do.
Right. So what do we do on it? So what are we supposed to do?
I know you're in a unique situation. That's what the whole problem is.
Thank you.
You find yourself in a different role than you got elected to fulfill. So, interesting problems. But you guys are so smart, you'll figure it out.
We're going to have a lottery. We're going to give it away. Whoever picks the right.
Mr. Fishback, I would just like to say thank you for your years of service to our city. I would like to thank you for your years of service to our city.
Oh, you're welcome.
I recall.
Working with the law is so important to get it right.
Absolutely. Thank you. Is there anyone else that is, we've exhausted the list? Is there someone else? I see two people headed to the mic. Come on down.
Good evening. My name is Tom Rikas. I live at 163 Prince George Street, right down here in Annapolis. I was kind of caught by the last thing that Fred said. The phrase was to get it right. Now that's kind of interesting because I've been a party to these conversations about Market House, well, since like last year when the initial legislation came to the council. And I've heard a lot of testimony about getting it right, getting it right, getting it right. I won't comment on what was discussed at the joint session last Thursday, but I will comment by saying this. The council got it right. Where did you get it right? You did something that hadn't happened here in Annapolis, ever. At least I don't think so. You had a joint session of 3 committees. And I believe I saw something where this was such a unique situation that you had to go to the Attorney General to get an opinion that this was authorized or something. Is that true?
Well, we've done it before, but we always like to check to make sure we get it right because each committee has to convene and have its own notes and all of that. So.
Right, so the cool thing was, and my giant takeaway from that, and I sat here for 2.5 hours, and actually I listened to some really sharp testimony from the city staff that was in direct response to questions that the council had posed. I listened to a dialogue back and forth that I haven't heard sitting here through all of these other council sessions. And I got to tell you, 2.5 hours gave me way more information than 20 times that time standing here speaking. And I've testified to the council, I've weighed in on this, and I got to tell you, that joint session, you really did, you got it right, you had a dialogue. How the closed session works out, frankly, there are a lot of financial details to be worked out. But I also know that there's a lot already in the city processes that will help ensure that whatever lease is negotiated, and I really hope it comes to pass quickly, that whatever lease is negotiated, that city processes will help to bolster the correct administration of that lease. But anyway, kudos to all of those involved in that joint session, because you got it right. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have a question?
Madam Chairman, members of the council, Doug Smith, 5 Revel Street. I'd just like to start by saying I'd like to see the Market House be a success. I'd like to see New Market LLC be a success. I think the key is, how do we get those objectives together into a lease? And for the observation, I have some familiarity of the Market House. It is a limited structure. It's not like anything else that we have in the city. But what I see is a pattern that previous administrations have done. We don't take advantage of the expertise that's in this community to help the council come to a good decision. You get fired information from both sides. Love the lease, hate the lease, like this vendor, don't like that vendor. We've got folks here. Mr. Kardash has raised some good questions that I think are worthy. Mr. Fishback brings his expertise to play. I think the council, if you feel you don't have the necessary expertise to evaluate what is a fair situation, because that's what we want to get to. It's got to be fair for the city. It's got to be fair for New Market LLC. We're not in a rush to go down a path based on only part of the information. If you need more information and you need more expert help, I'd say go get it, and we'd all be well served to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers?
Yeah, Keith Bouchard, 18 Bryce Road, 21409. Spouse of Michelle Bouchard, one of the partners in New Market, along with Jody Danik and Joe Lyon. I just want to say that we're excited and ready to move forward. And I respect the opinions of the group of people that were put together to speak with Mr. Kardash. And I think they have obviously some great experience. But this is about moving forward. This is about the vision for what Annapolis needs to be downtown. And I think we have a very positive change that's about to happen, both financially for the city, right? Let it be known that the city will no longer be paying what I've been told is about $140,000 a year in expenses. That'll be on our dime. So whatever that number is, I think that was number 137 or so that was maybe presented to us. That's going to be on our dime, plus whatever we decide to spend. We will then be paying a significant amount of lease to the city with some increases going forward. But that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is the heart and soul of the Market House and what we want to do in downtown Annapolis and what we want to do in City Dock. And the market days and the festivals and the vibrancy and the life that we want to bring back to the Market House. So, you all put out a competitive bid. You heard some detail about how expansive that process was earlier today in the testimony earlier from Mrs. Minor. But, we showed up, we bid, We put forth a very competitive bid. The city of Annapolis has spoken, the citizens have spoken. We've packed the house here many times with people that are really, really excited about the vision that we brought to this proposal, and we're ready to do it. We went down Friday morning, and we saw the crew basically eviscerating the market house. So we talked to the city, to the city administration, and we came to a sort of a moment of truth that they were about ready to, that crew that was down there was about ready to rip out some significant structure that would have set us back, the lessee back several months. And it wasn't about the money because it was city property that they were ripping out. So we had to quickly, Friday morning, negotiate a private deal with one of the current tenants to get him to stop ripping out city property. So, we feel like we're good stewards of that property. We feel like we are ready to serve the city. We did that sort of on our own dime, hoping and knowing that we're going to move through this process. But, we have our heart in this project, and we're ready to, ready to make it work. So, with all due respect to the folks that Mr. Kardash got together here tonight to speak about the complications of market rents and technical things of that nature, that's not what this is about. This is about the citizens of Annapolis and making this the community living room that it really deserves to be and bringing back the vibrancy of this great structure, and that's what we're looking to do. So we look forward to working on that as we go forward. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at this time? Come forward. Seeing none, I will declare the public hearing of 0518 closed. And now I'd like to invite Mayor Buckley back to take his rightful seat and conclude this meeting. Thank you. Should I take this with me?
Mr. City Attorney, can you present the next item on the agenda?
So, Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is what some people might consider the most important item on the agenda. The agenda has been completed.
Nice.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Pound.
if no one has anything for the good of the order, I'd move that we adjourn.
I'll second. Meeting adjourned. Thank you so much for all your input. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.